everyone, it's time for a live look at the astrology. My name is Katie Sweetman, and this is your look at the astrology for December 1st through 7th, 2025. So we are in the last month of the year. How is that possible? But this week, our main focus is what's called a Gemini full moon. So we have a Gemini full moon on December 4th, so just in a few days from now, and how that is really illuminating some very interesting astrology, and we will all, of course, live this astrology differently, but it's trying to reveal something, show something that we haven't been seeing. We'll get more into it into a moment, but for those that don't know who I am, my name is Katie Sweetman. I'm an astrologer and psychic medium located here in the rolling hills of Central Maryland, and every week we gather live to look at the astrology. You hear me say it every week. The astrology is 50%. You are the other 50%. And maybe that's a great reminder for this Gemini full moon. As you may know, we're in Sagittarius season. Sagittarius is a sign of wisdom and knowledge, worldliness, travel, exploration, distant shores, foreign lands, really opening up our eyes to the world as a whole. But it's in Gemini that we need to see things let's say, their individual parts. If Gemini is wisdom, if Sagittarius is wisdom and knowledge, then Gemini is the words on the page. It's the information. When I teach astrology, and maybe you've even heard me say it before, because it's an important point, even though it's a little bit technical, but I think it's one of those things about astrology we can all learn from. And something that I say very often is that the zodiac is the wheel of life. The zodiac, each sign teaches us something very important about life. And each sign, like a ladder, builds upon one another. And so when we get to Sagittarius, we've stepped out into a part of the astrology that's about the world. Again, it's about looking up towards the stars after looking inward during Scorpio season. And each sign of the zodiac, it sort of acts as a support for one another. We have Sagittarius on one side of the sky. We have Gemini on the other side of the sky. In astrology, there are 12 signs. Again, this might be a little bit technical. Bear with me for a moment. And there are different what are called modalities: cardinal, fixed, and mutable. I wanted to just quickly spotlight the mutable signs. These are your Geminis, your Virgos, your Sagittariuses, and your Pisces. Or you may even have planets in those signs for an example. But this is why we need to make sure that we're never looking at the zodiac or astrology just from our sun sign. There's all these other signs that are out there, and they build our own personal astrology. So those 4 signs of the zodiac, they're somewhere in your astrology. But more importantly, they teach us something really powerful. These 4 mutable signs help us to discover life. Now, if life was just Gemini, it would just be information. We would learn something, but we wouldn't retain it. It would be information, but it wouldn't build anything. Then we have Virgo, and Virgo is the second mutable sign. And then the information becomes critical thinking. We're able to figure out how this information connects to things. We're able to have discernment. It builds upon, let's say, the choices of Gemini, and then we have the discernment again with Virgo. Then we get into the Sagittarius. Hey, the sun is in Sagittarius right now. And Sagittarius is the sign of wisdom and knowledge. You've heard me say that a few times already this evening. And that wisdom and knowledge is built of the information, the learning, the education, the classes that we did with both Gemini and Virgo. But Sagittarius is not the last mutable sign. So how do we discover our world? We also need to make sure that we leave room for Pisces. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. And it says true discovery is something that takes us beyond this world. With information, ideas, and even wisdom and knowledge, Pisces is the transmission of that wisdom and knowledge. And so that wisdom and knowledge can build a new cycle, a new life, for example. So even though we're in Sagittarius season, even though we're going to have a Gemini full moon this week, we need to understand that these are 2 signs that really help us to discover the world around us. whether again it's just information, communication, listening, learning through Gemini, or this sort of wisdom and knowledge and education on a broader level that brings us to Sagittarius. Even though we have the South Node in Virgo right now, but we have both Neptune and Saturn in Pisces. So we still have something really pulling at the Pisces side of things. And so this full moon is also saying on a deeper level that we need to go higher. We need to go beyond ourselves. We need to see things from a higher perspective. We need to listen to our intuition. But at the same time, we also need to weigh our options. We need to look at our choices. I'm saying this as somebody who has a Gemini moon, so I know Gemini very well. And Gemini, it's a beautiful sign. I think all the signs are beautiful, quite honestly. But it teaches us about the multiplicity, the diversity, the creation, has all these different flavors and colors and things to do and places to go and people to see, and you want to try everything. And there's both that side of Gemini that says, keep your options open, try new things, be curious. But then there's the other side of Gemini that we all have to learn to have the discernment and to make the best choices possible. This full moon that we have on the 4th, it'll be at 13 degrees of Gemini. It's roughly opposite Mars in Sagittarius. It's also picking up on Mercury and Scorpio. So I wanted to sort of highlight that duality of the sign and maybe even the deeper facets of the sign and even the mutable signs as a whole, because the energy of the full moon points towards Scorpio. And on paper, you would say, well, Scorpio doesn't seem to have a lot in common with Gemini. Gemini is just, trying new things, being in the fullness of life. And Scorpio can get really introspective. It can get very deep. It can be both, of course, but this is a reminder that this is a full moon that's taking that curiosity, that discover, that movement of Gemini and putting it through a Scorpio lens. Scorpio is a lot of things. It's both a sign of matter in the material world. It teaches us about life and death and transformation. It's also a very psychological sign. And it also teaches us about the things that are, symbolically hidden. So this is a full moon that might reveal something that's hidden. It could be something that's within ourselves, our psyche. It could be information that's coming to light. And as we learned during Scorpio season, and we learned through the Scorpio Scorpio new moon just 2 weeks ago, that Scorpio represents in the wheel of life, in this ladder of the zodiac, a very necessary step. It means that we need to look within, we need to confront ourselves, and to see things that we wouldn't typically see if we didn't really spend the time sitting with the Scorpio archetype and energy. So we have this duality with this full moon. On one hand, it's saying, make choices, keep your options open. And sometimes Sagittarius's trap is, my joke about Sagittarius is 99% of the time, Sagittarius is right. They know exactly what they're talking about. But it's that 1% every time that gets Sagittarius. So it's like Gemini is saying, don't be so convinced that you're right that it actually creates a blind spot. But that said, it's a tension between two signs. I mean, tension not necessarily is a bad thing. It's a tension between two signs that are about discovery, ideas, information, travel, movement. And this full moon with the energies of Scorpio tell us to go within, to ask ourselves deep questions, and maybe to have very revealing conversations with the people in our life. And I sort of have this image, especially with Mercury and Scorpio. It's very much the detective. It very much wants to, almost obsessively so, get to the bottom of mystery. So this is a full moon that is playing out, not just on the 4th, it's actually playing out over the coming days, because my dog just sits down, the whole camera shakes. We get into next week, even though it's a few days after the full moon, and we have Mars square Saturn on the 9th, and then we have Mercury opposite Uranus on the 10th. So this energy of discovery, information, ideas, revealing something that's been hidden is even spilling out into next week. Remember, we are still in a Scorpio lunar month, one that began on November 20th. So even though we are well in Sagittarius season by now, we still have that one foot on the Scorpio rung, so to speak, where we have to sit with our discomfort. We have to look within. We have to get to the bottom of the mystery. Further, Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius seasons, over in Cancer. So maybe this is about the past, or memories, or family, or legacies, or inheritances. Inheritances don't have to be necessarily monetary. They can be the things that are passed on emotionally, spiritually, psychically, from generation to generation. And even though this full moon has some confrontational aspects to it, maybe that's the push that we need in order to see something that maybe we haven't been able to see before. Could be something on an ancestral level, could be something on a personal, psychological, or internal level. This full moon is important because it brings us 3 months after the Gemini, 3 months after the Pisces lunar eclipse on September 7th at 15 degrees of Pisces. So something that I've noticed as an astrologer side note, like I just think my brain is still in retrograde, or maybe my brain is still on Thanksgiving, but Mercury just turned direct a couple of days ago. But anyway, so the other thing about this full moon is that it picks up in the energies of the lunar eclipse from September 7th. And I've just noticed over and over again as an astrologer that the period that comes 3 months after an eclipse and 3 months before an eclipse is a really powerful time for when the eclipse energy can actually manifest. So the seeds were planted in September. Again, September 7th, lunar eclipse, 15 Pisces, solar eclipse at 29 degrees of Virgo on September 21st. That solar eclipse connects to the Sagittarius new moon that we will have in 2 weeks on, I think it's the 19th of, the 19th of December. I'm going to say the 19th of Sagittarius. That is not correct. 19th of December. So pay attention to what is coming up this week. It's not to expect anything per se. It's to feel, observe, to listen with your intuitive ears. It could be a dream. It could be inner realization. It could be a conversation that you're having that begins to put something bigger into your focus, into the forefront. Sometimes this period, 3 months after an eclipse, 3 months before an eclipse, can be an important turning point. So December, especially the first 2 weeks of December, have been a time that for me as an astrologer, I've kept my eye on, especially with that Mars squares Saturn on December 9th. That Mars squares Saturn will be at 25 degrees of Sagittarius and Pisces. So Mars and Saturn can sometimes activate, instigate. They can bring something into reality. These are two planets from a traditional standpoint, can sometimes really mark major events and personal milestones. That's not going to be true for everybody that's listening, of course, but it's just to listen for what are the themes, because sometimes even, like I said, 3 months before eclipses, we're going to have a solar eclipse on February 17th, although that solar eclipse will be at 28 degrees of Aquarius, and then on March 3rd, by the way, plus or minus a day, depending on what part of the world you are, on March 3rd, it's going to be a lunar eclipse in Virgo. I think it's at, it is going to be at 12 degrees of Virgo. So whatever is happening might be coming back again or playing out as we get into February and March. We will have to see. The sun does square the lunar nodes this week. Again, it's a ripple of eclipse energy. Typically, eclipse energy marks the milestones and chapters of our life. People can come into our lives. People can come out of our lives. We can move. We can make a career change. And maybe this is a really important time for something to happen. We will see. Other than this full moon, I did want to highlight, even though Uranus is not in Gemini anymore, it left Gemini on November 7th, but it will come back to Gemini on April 25th of 2026. And Gemini in general, in that Gemini part of our astrology, we need to start to pay more attention to it. When I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs, you'll get a reminder of what part of your astrology Gemini governs, because when Uranus goes back into Gemini, that area, roughly April onwards for the next 6 years, that area is under a lot of change and transformation. That's just what Uranus does. It's like the awakener. It says this part of your life will change. I know that's a big statement, but let's go back to 2018-19 when Uranus went into Taurus. And for a lot of people, especially the fixed signs that are listening, there's been a lot of changes and transformation over the last 6 and 7 years, for example. This week, what else is going on? Again, my brain is still in retrograde. But like I said, the big news this week is the Gemini full moon. Speaking of 2026, I'm going to be doing my yearly webinar that sort of look ahead at what the coming year will be like from an astrological standpoint. So each year I do a webinar, and I will do my Astrology of 2026 webinar on Saturday, December 20th at 11 a.m. Eastern. It is recorded for replay, so if you're in a different time zone, if you are busy at that time, you will be able to get the recording and the slides and any other materials. So you can go to my show notes. You can go to empoweringastrology.com/events and learn more and register for my Astrology of 2026 webinar. And since we're on the end of the year, holidays and getting ready for 2026, I am doing a 10% off code that is valid until the 26th of this month. And this is for both consultations and also for my packages and coaching. The code will be for packages and coaching will be New Year 2026, and for consultations it'll be Holiday 25. I will also put that back in the show notes. I forgot to put in the show notes right now, but if you would like to book a consultation with me for the coming year, or even get ready and do packages for me so we can really create some structured transformation work around 2026. So I'm your gal. So that said, I'm sure if you're at least here in the United States like I am, you're getting back into the work mode, perhaps after travel, perhaps after holidays with family. I know that we are an international audience, and especially as we go into December, we have a lot of things on our horizon. So that said, let's go through each of the 12 zodiac signs so we can look and see where this Gemini full moon is activating, where even the energies of Gemini are in the chart, so we can kind of keep an ear ahead for Uranus going back into Gemini in 2026. So starting with Aries. So Mars is your planet, and Mars especially, we'll talk more about this next week, it's coming up to kind of a sticky point in the sky at the moment. It's going to be squaring Saturn. I probably said this to some degree last week, but it's important to recap. Mars squares Saturn is a big deal astrological transit. Saturn in general really creates this push to grow up, to make commitments, to build, to mature, to grow older. And this week and next week could be either a reality check or a time when your efforts are beginning to come together, or you're feeling resistance, you're getting pushback. Whatever you are feeling, it's part of a bigger story. Saturn always says, come correct, meaning make sure that you are at a high level of yourself, you are putting things in order, you are not cutting corners, you're not rushing, because this is a week where something really wants to take shape and take form. Roughly, in general, when we do the work that Saturn asks us to do, which is to take our time to really work through something, to build, to grow, to mature, we start to see what our work has been building. Now, keep in mind that Saturn, and I know I said this last week, Saturn is coming to the end of what's called your 12th sign. For you, Sagittarius, where Mars is at the moment, this is a time that's very much about belief and faith and philosophy, your point of view, really what do you stand for, your convictions. And at the same time, Saturn has been in a place that has been saying to you on a larger level, Aries, you're coming to the end of a great chapter. What do you want to leave behind? And what do you want to bring with you? Because roughly when Saturn goes back into Aries on February 13th, what you bring with you is with you with the next cycle. So use this week, Gemini full moon, to really examine your choices. How you speak, how you listen, how you communicate, the power behind your words, the power behind your choices. Where are you putting your energy? Because Saturn is really trying to say to you, this is important and this is not important. It's that black and white. And you might get, again, a little bit of reality check, especially if your energy is going in places that are not supporting you for the future. That said, Gemini is something called your third sign, voice, communication, how you think and listen and learn. So on a very surface level, this could be a very busy week, one where you're traveling, you're moving, you're exploring, a lot of things to do. Sometimes when there's a lot of energy in this part of your astrology, you're taking classes, you're focusing on your education, you're booking a trip. But this is also a time where it may be about how you use your voice, the conversations that you're having, and maybe especially with Mercury and Scorpio, very powerful, deep, illuminating, psychological conversations that help to reveal something that maybe has been hidden. Whatever, again, is showing up this week, it is part of this narrative of things beginning to leave your life. I would say beginning. This has really been the story over the past 2 years. And to be very conscientious and to make the right decisions, again, about what you want to bring with you into 2026 and what you want to leave behind. Taurus, so Venus is your planet, and as of yesterday, Venus is now in Sagittarius. So on one hand, you have this energy of fire. Venus in Sagittarius loves freedom, exploration, movement, travel, doesn't like to be tied down. It likes variety. But on the other hand, Sagittarius for you is something called your 8th sign. So this is terrain for you that's taking place in a part of your astrology that's more psychological. It's more about looking inward and facing yourself and having to sit with a lot of the deeper things, the deeper facets and aspects of life that tend to come up. So maybe the next few weeks, especially, while I think it's the 25th or 24th that Venus goes into Capricorn. Venus goes into Capricorn on the 24th. Between now and the December 24th, it's more internal. It's more psychological. It's about intimacy, vulnerability, trust, power, in addition to the fact that it's Sagittarius. So, but it's also could be about money and assets and planning for the future and the assets that you have available to you, the financial planning, especially getting your finances ready for the next year. Maybe it's about the assets that you share with a partner or even the benefits that you receive, but there also could be a financial component to all this. And speaking of financial component, the Gemini full moon, Gemini is something called your 2nd sign, money, income, material stability, and security. And so it says that on some level, you have to make a choice. Maybe on some level, it's a choice about how you're spending your money, where you're investing your money in. Maybe you are on some level looking at spending and taxes and again, preparing for the coming year. Maybe it's more philosophical, like what truly is of value and importance to you. Typically, Taurus is very value conscious, but more materially value conscious. They're the sign that is typically, not always, really planning towards the future. They've got stockpiles of things because they are really trying to create material stability and security for themselves. Of course, not all Tauruses, but that's generally how it works. So this full moon can mark a purchase, an investment. This full moon highlights an area of your astrology that Uranus will return to in April and spend the next 6 years. So keep in mind that money and income as a theme, as a topic, not as like literally, but who knows, as a theme, as a topic, and value, and what you invest in, and what you, even your sense of self-worth and value, that area is going to be seeing a lot of bigger changes in the coming years. So listen for what is coming up around this full moon. Like if you're making a purchase or a large purchase or investment, or maybe it's like, I don't want to necessarily spend this money this holiday season. Maybe I want to do it something different. Maybe I want to be more experiential, for example. Maybe that can reflect a shift of values. And maybe for some Tauruses, you're really thinking about maybe earning a living in a very different way, for example. So there you go. Oh, I should also add, because Mercury, the ruler of the full moon, is in Scorpio, your relationship sign, there is something about you and another person. Again, it could be the assets that you have with a partner. It could be a conversation about value and investments with somebody in your life. But there is something, again, about relationships and possibly the major relationships of your life that are being highlighted with this full moon. Gemini, you are in the spotlight today. So a full moon, or this week, a full moon on the 4th, so that's Thursday, December 4th, puts you in the spotlight. This is a time, Sagittarius for you is the time when the sun goes through your relationship sign. It's 6 months, roughly 6 months from your birthday. It's about other people, connections, whether it doesn't have to be what I like to call a capital R relationship, a romantic relationship, or a partnership, but it could be just connections and socializing and interacting with people. You do have Mars in this part of your chart, so Mars is a little bit noisy influence when it comes to relationships. So maybe a relationship matter is heating up. Mars heats things up, especially this week into next week with Mars square Saturn. There's kind of some pinch points in the astrology this week, next week, again with the Mars square Saturn, with the energy of the eclipses being activated. So you had eclipses in your 10th sign of career on September 7th and your 4th sign of home and family on September 21st. And this is speaking about some sort of shift, a shift in your household, your family, your direction, maybe the direction that you want to take yourself in 2026. The energy of the full moon can really put you in the spotlight, in the sense that things are a bit dynamic in your life right now. Things are happening. You have to make a decision. You have to make a choice. Mercury, the ruler of the eclipse, is in your 6th. There's something either about discernment or really how you put your time and energy in your day-to-day life. It could be health and wellness. It could be a work matter, but there is something, especially because you either are a Gemini or Gemini rising, and sort of the work of that sign in general is to really look at where you're putting your energy, where you're putting your choices. And this could be a week, especially next week, where there could be major personal events and milestones that have their seeds in the eclipses of September, and maybe even the eclipses of this past March of 2025 as well. Oh, also, gotta look at my notes. Also, because Uranus will go back to Gemini on April 25th of 2026, keep in mind, Gemini, that in general, there's some big, capital B, astrology, capital A astrology that is going to be unfolding in 2026, into 27, and even beyond. For a lot of Gemini risings, not everybody, the coming year, if not already, is the start of a very different chapter of your life. So listen again to this full moon, because it might be picking up on themes that you come back to on a larger level in 2026 and beyond. Cancer. Cancer. So the moon is your planet, and this week the moon has gone from the end of Aries. It might even be in Taurus as I'm speaking. Let's see. It's back in Taurus. It's going to take too long to look, but it's going to go from Aries, which is your career sign, your highest, most public part of your astrology. That this was really Sunday into Monday, and then I think it's Tuesday. The moon goes into Taurus. That's your friends. That's your community. It's looking towards the future. That's Wednesday into Thursday, and then Thursday evening we have the Gemini full moon. Now, for you, Gemini is something called your 12th sign. When there's either a new moon or a full moon in this part of your astrology, it highlights a part of your life that is more spiritual, subtle, needing to let go, needing to release. For some Cancer risings, to have a Gemini full moon is simply a reminder that you need to let go of something. You can't bring it with you. It's time to let it be. For some Cancer risings, a Gemini full moon can be a time where it really reminds you of the importance of your spirituality. Spirituality means different things to different people. To get quiet, to look within, to make sure that you are cultivating your inner voice, your intuition, for example, to be nourished by something that you can't intellectualize or even quantify. The 12th is both a space where we've come to the end of a cycle, which means something's ending, but it's also a space that opens us up to the world beyond. So for some Cancer risings, your dreams are very highlighted, very illuminated, or maybe you just need to rest. And that's the other role of the 12th, is to remind us that there are times in our life or times in the day where we can't keep going. We need to rest, we need to recuperate and to recharge. Sagittarius season in general is a time to focus on health, getting your vegetables, drinking your vitamins, taking your vitamins, drinking your vegetables, something like that. Making sure you get some exercise, some fresh air, some sunshine, whatever health and wellness means to you. But the 6, which is where Sagittarius is for you, that's your physical health. The 12th is your spiritual health. And there is that push and pull, especially with the full moon, between the physical and the non-physical, the physical and the spiritual. For example, the full moon points towards Mercury and Scorpio. That part of your astrology is about you, your talents, your gifts, your abilities, how you express who you are. And with this full moon about letting something go, it could be aspects of who you thought you were, aspects of personality that actually are not yours. And Scorpio helps you to strip away anything that is false so that you can reveal the trueness, that's even a word, trueness of who you are. Keep an eye on Gemini. Now, Gemini is a very subtle space in relation to your astrology, because Uranus is going to go back into that space on April 25th of 2026. Uranus going through the 12th, you're not going to notice it, let's say, the way the other signs will notice Uranus going through Gemini in their own astrology, because for you, and it really depends on who you are and your spiritual maturity and your sense of self-awareness, but for some of you, Uranus to Gemini is the start of a great awakening, and to be able to reveal, to see, and to discover the world beyond this world. Leo, so the sun is your planet, and as you know, it's Sagittarius season, so you're getting that energy of fire. Sagittarius is something called your 5th sign, the sign of creativity, self-expression, joy, fun, passion. And to go back to a comment I've made in the introduction, it's important to say again, but each sign of the zodiac is important, even if we're like, but I'm a Leo rising. We can't forget that in reality, we are all 12 signs of the zodiac. And when the sun is in Sagittarius, it helps you to reignite the passion, to refine the spark. Because if Leo is the light of the sun is your ruling planet, then Sagittarius is the light of the stars. It helps you to look beyond yourself, to have a sense of wonder, to get back in touch with what truly lights you up and what truly gives you joy and passion. That said, we're having a Gemini full moon this week, and that full moon is illuminating something called your 11th sign. And the 11th sign for everybody is the sign of friends, community, society, humanity, social issues, and social causes. And so, on some level, this is a simple call with this full moon to take your talents, your gifts, your abilities, and to share them with the world, or even to share them with your friends or your community. For some Leo risings, this time is simply about your community, like who's in your community, how you are putting time and energy to cultivate friendships and connections and social connections. For some Leo risings, it could be something bigger. You're getting involved in a social issue or cause, humanitarian themes. Maybe you're just opening up your eyes to the world and trying to figure out where you belong. For some, it's about the future, really thinking about, especially as we get to the new year, almost to the new year, really thinking about 2026 and maybe even beyond. The energy of this full moon points towards your fourth home, family, roots, foundation. You may have a choice to make about your future that directly impacts your home, your living situation. Maybe it's something about a family member, maybe it's about the past, a memory, something that really connects you. But this is where there's this push to let something go, to release. And this could be to prepare you for the shifts to come in 2026. Now, keep in mind to really watch the 11th, because Uranus is going to go into this space again. It was from July 7th to November 7th, but it will come back to your 11th on April 25th and not leave for 6 years. And so your relationship with community, with friends, with society, with social issues, with social causes, in the collective, that already is an area that's going to see a lot of big changes and transformations. So again, listen for a theme or a thread, because it could very well be something that you're coming back to starting April. Virgo, so Mercury is your planet, and as you know, Mercury is now direct as of last week. It's still in Scorpio, something called your third sign. So it's just been this time where it's, on some hand, it's about like duties and tasks and work, and maybe you've been very busy. And for some Virgos, it's more about how you speak, how you listen, how you learn, the conversations. Maybe you've been having really important conversations at this time. Maybe it's more nuanced, because Mercury is always about getting to the bottom of things, to say something and to be very clear about what you're saying. And maybe on some level, because Mercury and Scorpio can really be blunt and even sometimes cut like a knife, but to have the consciousness and even the conscientiousness of how you speak, how you communicate, and how you listen and learn. And maybe the most radical thing that can happen, especially with this energy, this full moon presaging Uranus going back into Gemini, is to learn to get out of your head, to not be so analytical, for example. Speaking of that Gemini full moon, so the full moon is in something called your 10th. Now, the 10th is the highest space in your personal astrology. It's your public life, your public reputation, it's your career, it's the title after your name, it's your ambitions. And to have a full moon in this part of your astrology on a very simple level says that your professional life, your public life is very illuminated at the moment. Maybe you're seeing something going on in your professional life. Maybe you have a decision to make. Maybe you've been interviewing and you finally hear about a new job. But keep in mind, and I'm sort of jump into Uranus for a second, even though Uranus is not there, it'll come back to your career sign on April 25th of 2026, and it will be there for 6 years. And so a lot of Virgos, and Virgo, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, is a very common rising sign. That's another topic for another time. And this, in many ways, is affecting a lot of people, because Virgo is going to go through some sort of career shift. That may not be literal for you. You don't change your jobs. It could be just simply a change with your relationship with work or your ambitions, or maybe it's even getting noticed for what you've been doing out in the world. But I wanted to say that because the full moon could be presaging a larger change or shift or trend that really is more visible or manifests in 2026. For example, this full moon points towards you. Mercury is over in Scorpio, and maybe this is about needing to make some really powerful decisions, understanding the power of choice, maybe even understanding your power in your career and how you use that power. This full moon also activates eclipse energy. You had eclipses in your sign, Virgo, back on September 21st, and you had eclipses in Pisces on September 7th, your relationship sign. So this could be a week, and even next week, especially with the Mars square Saturn on the 9th of December, and even Mercury opposite Uranus on the 10th, where things are shifting and shaking or reshaping and reinventing. And maybe this is something that's setting you up for the bigger changes to come in 2026. Libra. So Venus is your planet, and Venus, as you maybe know from last week, it's now in Sagittarius. So for you, Libra, Sagittarius is something called your third sign. It is the sign of travel, exploration. Now for Sagittarius, that's travel that wants to see the world, but for you, it's closer to home. It's trips, it's road trips, it's movements around your town or in the local vicinity, but it creates a lot of busyness that takes you to the 24th. So maybe just life, and I realize this is just in general a busy time of year, depending on who you are and what you have going on. And this astrology really ramps that up as well. We do have a lot of things going on in Sagittarius. Mars is there as well. The sun is there, so it adds this busyness and maybe again travel. Maybe it's more about education, maybe the conversations that you're having, maybe there's something that you really want to share, you want to teach, you want to have other people know. The full moon in the 9th, so it's opposite the 3rd, says that this is a full moon that's about discovery, wisdom, knowledge. A full moon that might say that you need to make some decisions about what you believe in, what you stand for, what's your truth, what's your convictions. It's a full moon that in a way launches you into the world, and maybe you are again planning some long distance travel. This could even be foreign travel. Maybe you're thinking more about your education and how you want to make your world bigger with this full moon. This full moon points towards Mercury and Scorpio. Scorpio is your second sign of money and income. So it could be choices about how you're earning a living, choices about how you're spending money. It could even be choices about what you value, especially around that sense of truth and conviction. Like if you value something, Libra, then how are you putting your time and energy towards what you truly value, for example? But it just says there's a lot of stuff going on with this astrology at this time. And keep an eye on Sagittarius, keep an eye on Gemini as a general whole, your 9th, because Uranus is going to get back into this space starting April 25th of 2026, and will be there for 6 years. So you're, in general, stepping into a period of your life where it is about illuminating, awakening to the world beyond you. Wanting more out of life, needing to share something, speak something, shifting what you thought you believed of things a certain way, but maybe with Uranus going back into Gemini, you begin to shift how you believe and what you stand for. And these are themes that could be very present with the full moon this week and next week, but they are part of a larger thread that you will return to in 2026 and beyond. Scorpio. So Mars is your planet, and Mars, as you know, it's been in Sagittarius since the beginning of November, and Sagittarius is something called your second sign: money, income, material stability, and security. It's a time where Mars is very motivated to do what it needs to do to create more stability. So that could mean there's a focus on money. You're really trying to earn more money. You're looking at the money that you spend. It could be a little bit more philosophical. You're like, what do I need to do in order to create stability and security? Where do I need to invest my time, my money, for example? And so Mars in this part of your astrology, it's very nuts and bolts, even though it's Sagittarius, which Sagittarius loves freedom, but it's very nuts and bolts where it's like I need to pay attention to the money that I make, the food, the prices. I'm saying this as a Scorpio. I'm just like looking and like doing the math of how much more expensive everything is and how everything is 30% more expensive. But that is my soapbox for 2 seconds. But anyway, maybe that's how you're looking at money, income, material stability, and security at this time right now. Now Mars, it's in a little bit of a tight spot at the moment, and this is something that takes you into next week because Mars is square Saturn. As much as I love Saturn as an astrologer, Saturn is still Saturn. Saturn is saying to every Scorpio, you better come correct. Saturn is over in your fifth. It's been in the fifth since 2023 to take yourself and take your talent seriously. And with Mars in the second, as much as it's about money and income, it could also be about your talents. It could be about your self-worth as well. And so to know your self-worth and to take yourself seriously, for example, sometimes Mars and square Saturn can be very event-oriented. It could be a time of a week of events, and even next week of events in Scorpio's life. This is playing off of the eclipses from September, and so events from September might be coming to a head this week as well. Then we also have the Gemini full moon. Now, this Gemini full moon, we don't always think of Gemini having a lot in common with Scorpio, but it's sort of your reminder, hopefully this is not some mental gymnastics, that Scorpio is the 8th sign of the zodiac, and Gemini is Scorpio's 8th sign. So we really can discover a lot of deeper information and wisdom and knowledge, or a deeper understanding around Scorpio by this simple fact. So that Gemini really reveals the duality of Scorpio. Any Scorpio, I'm saying this as a Scorpio, it's like you know that there's light and there's dark. You know that you have both inside of you. It's sort of like, which do you feed? That said, this full moon is putting into the spotlight perhaps something that is typically hidden, or that part of you that knows darn well about the duality within and the duality around you. Do you burn it all down, Scorpio, or do you pick the high road? Pick the high road, maybe. This full moon takes the energy of your 8th and it points it towards you. Mercury is in Scorpio. And it's saying that you need to take the lead, make a choice, really see something for what it is, even if it's not easy. And keep in mind, next week, in addition to Mars square Saturn, Mercury is going to be opposing Uranus. It could be information, conversations, something very deeply psychological at this time, but it helps you to see something as it truly is. So it's some pretty, spicy astrology, especially as we get into next week. But I'm saying this Scorpio to Scorpio, or even Scorpio to Scorpio rising, sit with the deeper realizations, because the beauty of the 8th is that it can reveal the hidden motivations, the things about yourself, or even the things that you're saying and choosing you don't even realize that you're saying and choosing. And when you have that light bulb that goes off, maybe as you go into next week, then you can make a very powerful decision and take a course of action that makes the transformation of the 8th happen. Sagittarius, so this Jupiter is your planet, and we've been talking about this since earlier this year, but since June, I think it was June 9th, Jupiter, your planet, has been in Cancer. Cancer is the sign of home and family. It kind of brings that worldliness of Sagittarius to a sign that's more about your immediate environment, the people that you connect to, the family, or the people who are like family. For you, Cancer is something called your 8th sign, so it actually reaches into themes about legacies. the past, memories, the things, secrets, even the things that are hidden. And this time is for you, especially as you get into 2026. So Jupiter doesn't leave Cancer until the end of June of 2026, is to do a lot of inner reflection and deep work, because then when Jupiter gets into Leo at the end of June of 2026, then it's the fire that really supports and builds off of the Sagittarius sun. So inner work, and keep that in mind, because there's just a lot of things going on in Sagittarius' astrology. And I know I've been saying this for a while, but it's like doubly so this week, and no pun intended, because there is a Gemini full moon on the 4th. And Gemini is something called your relationship sign. It's both what I like to call the capital R relationships. Your capital R relationships are your partnerships, your marriage, your spouse, the people that really build and support your life. It doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. This is not necessarily parents, but these are the people that really forge your life. But this part of the chart can also talk about how do you connect. How do you relate? How do you socialize with other people? And this full moon is highlighting an area that is undergoing or will undergo a greater transformation, especially as you get into 2026, because Uranus on April 25th of 2026 is going to go back into Gemini and be there for 6 years. So listen for whatever, even if it's an ex from the past that pops up, or a realization about a pattern that you have in relationships, because Uranus in general is trying to shift and shake up and transform the old structures and the old patterns. That said, on a very surface level, this could be a very social week about connections, relationships, people coming in and out of your life. And keep in mind that this full moon is 3 months after the lunar eclipse of September 7th. It's roughly 3 months after the solar eclipse on September 21st. And it's also 3 months before a Virgo lunar eclipse on March 3rd at 12 degrees of Virgo. And Virgo for you is your career sign. Again, Gemini is your relationship sign. And we also even have Mars square Saturn going into next week. And Saturn is in something called your 4th sign, home, family, roots, foundation. So in English, a lot of things are pushing and pulling at the structures of Sagittarius's life. Something is in the midst of changing, and then again, this has been the case for probably the past year or more. The full moon points towards Mercury in Scorpio. Scorpio is something called your 12th sign. Something is coming to an end. That could be symbolic, that could be a release, that could be an old pattern, that could be an old relationship, but it is to clear space for something new. For example, if you're not in a relationship and that's something that you desire, but maybe you realize with this full moon that something's been in that space. Maybe it's a past relationship that hasn't fully cleared out, and so this full moon is giving you an opportunity to really release and to let something go. But it's also a time to have really deep conversations, to listen to your intuitive voice, your spiritual voice, and whatever is going on in relationships, to see something from a much higher perspective. Capricorn. So Saturn is your planet, and Saturn, as you know, it's got a couple more months left in Pisces, something called your 3rd sign. And so on just a basic level, I know I've said this a million times already, but the past 2 years, your priority has either been your education, or how you use your voice, taking your voice seriously, or learning to master your voice, or to say the right thing and maybe not say the things that you used to say, or maybe it's about a manuscript and writing and really pushing yourself. And that's the thing about being a Capricorn, or even a Capricorn rising, is that the bar is always set high for you. And it's a reality, but my joke with Capricorn rising clients is like, don't beat yourself up with the bar. It's like you set a higher level for yourself, but don't like be miserable and again beat yourself up if you don't reach that bar. So having said all that, I will say, especially as we go into next week, Mars does square Saturn. This is typically, classically speaking, a pretty an aspect that can mark events and personal milestones, and that's this week and next week, but the 9th is the exact aspect. we have a Gemini full moon. Now, to have a Gemini full moon, it means the sun is in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the sign that comes before your season, your birthday season, or even the sun going into your rising sign if you're Capricorn rising. So this is the time in your personal calendar where it's about letting go, preparing for the next cycle, reflecting on what has happened, to release, to go inward, to get quiet. So to have a Gemini full moon, it puts the spotlight in something called your six. It's very real world. It's the duties and responsibilities that you have, your schedule, how you arrange and organize your day-to-day life. It's also health and wellness. And there is a push and pull in this full moon between your physical health and wellness and your spiritual health and wellness, and always having to find the balance between the needs and the wants of heaven and earth. The energy of this full moon points over towards Scorpio. So the full moon points towards Mercury and Scorpio is something called your 11th sign, your friends, your community, your social network, social issues, social causes, humanity, the collective. So this is a space that's not about you. It's about the world and the people that make up your world. And so this full moon on some level is saying it's about what is your commitment, your service, and your dedication to the world as a whole. It's also saying to look towards the future and maybe to clean things up, to clean things out. Maybe there's something about a friendship or a connection that you're also navigating as well. That said, with the energies of Saturn very well, I know you're Saturn ruled and Mars squares Saturn. There's just a real push on Capricorn rising for something to really begin to take shape and take form. So not that you would, but always come correct, set the high bar, really developing and continue to develop a strong sense of accountability and authority, but don't beat yourself up with that. Give yourself some grace, give yourself some leeway, and just as your reminder, that Sagittarius season is a time to rest, to go within, to soul search. And this is all preparing you for the sun's arrival in Capricorn on the 21st. Oh, I will add Capricorn because Uranus will go into Gemini in 2026. And I've been saying this for the other signs. Pay attention to whatever themes are coming up, whether it's a theme about how you run your day-to-day life, or a theme about your work and your projects, or a theme about service, or a theme about health, because Uranus is coming back into this part of your astrology next year for the next 6 years, and that area will undergo a makeover. Aquarius, so Saturn is your planet, and as you probably know, we are in the last couple of months of Saturn's time in Pisces, not to return for another 30 years. Yes, you heard it correctly. So that's the thing about being an Aquarius or Aquarius rising, is that your life runs on these big arcs. Saturn typically will spend anywhere from 2.5 to 3 years in each of the zodiac signs. So it takes 30 years to go around. And so for you, you're coming to the end of a chapter that began in March of 2023. And this chapter on some level has been focused on money, income, material stability, and security. Maybe you have worked hard over the past couple of years to create material stability and security. Maybe it's been very philosophical over the past couple of years. You're like, I actually want to earn a living differently, or my values have shifted, for an example. And overall, Pisces is a very spiritual place for Saturn to be. It's a time to make sure that your material needs, but I think on some level, like how you're investing around those material needs are actually in alignment with your values. That said, we have a Gemini full moon this week, and Gemini is something called your 5th sign. I love the 5th sign of any astrology sign, because the 5th sign helps us to reconnect to our passion, our play, our creativity. If you're going to invest time and money into something, don't forget to also invest time and money into yourself. Aquarius in general, of course, this is not all Aquarius risings, but Aquarius in general is a sign that's very aware of the world. It typically thinks on an intellectual, broader level compared to the other signs of the zodiac. And so when you have a full moon in the fifth sign, it also says don't forget about you. Don't forget about your talents, your gifts, your abilities, the things that light you up and give you joy. For some Aquariuses, this is not going to be relevant for everybody. It can also talk about children and pregnancy. Again, that's not going to be relevant for everybody. This full moon, it points towards Mercury and Scorpio. Scorpio is something called your 10th sign, your career. So this could be a full moon that on some level gives you information about your career, your public life, the duties and responsibilities that you carry in the world in general. Mercury as a planet is typically about the choices that we make, this way or that way, or is about speaking, communicating, people hearing you, for an example. If this full moon is about your talents, your gifts, your abilities, or even taking the best of yourself, and maybe with Mercury and Scorpio in your 10th, making it part of your career or being an authority in what you have to say, or really showing up as a mentor figure for somebody, for example. That could be one way in which the full moon is showing up. But I also wanted to highlight that keep an eye on Gemini, because Gemini is a space where Uranus is going to come back to on April 25th of 2026. And that area, even though it's about the self, is going to see a lot of change and reinvention over the next 6 years. And on some level, with this full moon, maybe this full moon is asking you, who are you? Who are any of us? That's something that we cannot intellectualize. It has to be felt. And when you are doing things that light you up and give you joy, that is when you get to feel, even though it's subtle, you get to feel who you truly are. There will be what's called Mars square Saturn on the 9th, so that's next week. We'll talk more about this in the video for next week, but it is creating a sense of, let's say, pushed. Classically speaking, Mars square Saturn is an aspect that really is event-oriented and pushes us and marks personal milestones. So this is a week that's really pushing against you. You've got priorities, you've got things you have to take care of, serious things perhaps you have to take care of. And this is really helping you to, Mars and Saturn together can also make things concrete and make things real. Finally, Pisces. So Jupiter is your planet, and as you know, since June 9th, Jupiter has been in Pisces, something called your 5th sign. So on one hand, you get to really experience life, or at least that's the idea, from June of 2025 to the end of June of 2026. Really experience life through a sign that wants you to take care of yourself, to find your joy, find your passion, to get back in touch with who you are, to feel nourished on a personal level, to spend time with your creativity, for example. That said, it is Sagittarius season. Sagittarius is your 10th sign. It's your career, your public life, your public reputation, your duties, your responsibilities in the world. And I said this to some of the other signs like Virgo, like Gemini, like even you Pisces and Sagittarius, is that there is a lot going on in your astrology at the moment. It's, you've got 2 more months left. I know you're, scratching off the dates on your calendar, but you've got 2 more months left of Saturn in Pisces. I think on some level, I feel on some level that look back on who you have become over the past 2 years, because ideally Saturn is trying to help you to grow up and to become. Typically when Saturn is in our sign, or even in the sign of our rising, we have a lot more on our shoulders. We have more duties and responsibilities. So it's been possibly heavy the past 2 years. And maybe that's on one hand, you have the Jupiter over in Cancer that's helping you to get that nourishment in spite of all the heaviness. This full moon is highlighting something called your 4th home, family, roots, foundation, your address, your living situation, your past, your memories, your ancestors. And so this full moon says there's movement maybe that's happening in this part of your life. Maybe you are literally moving, you're deciding to move. Maybe there's just a lot of things going on in the home, in the household. Maybe it's not the physicality of where you live. Maybe it's about the past and memories and really shining a light on something. This full moon activates the eclipses, the lunar eclipse in Pisces from September 7th and the solar eclipse in Virgo from September 21st. So this is one of the reasons why a lot of things are going on in Pisces rising's life at the moment. And maybe things are shifting and pivoting this week, especially as we go into next week. We have Mercury opposite Uranus on December 10th, and Mars squares Saturn on December 9th. So those are, especially Mars squares Saturn, especially Mars squares Saturn with the eclipse energy. It can be a bit event oriented. So maybe personal events are happening this week, next week. Maybe you're seeing things shift and manifest in your professional life or your home life. And this is really related to the energy of that dynamic energy of change that we saw with the eclipses of September. Sometimes it takes 3 months for us to see what the eclipse was about, especially if it was on or near our sun sign or a rising sign. We are 3 months before a lunar eclipse in Virgo on March 3rd, and that lunar eclipse will be at 12 degrees of Virgo. So that's your relationship sign. So this could also be about relationships. And for one Pisces, that could be a partner moving in, or you and a partner are moving, or you're really thinking about taking things to a different level with a partnership. That's just an example. But this is a big full moon in the sense of all the different things that it's activating it, and maybe it's helping you to really start 2026 off on a different note. And keep in mind that Gemini is where Uranus is going to go back to on April 25th. And so from April 25th of next year for 6 years, home and family, roots, foundation, past, and memory is going to undergo a major reinvention in your life. So there you go. That is your look at the astrology of this week, December 1st through 7th, 2025. We have 4 more weeks left of the year. So when we check back next week, it'll be 3 more weeks. It's kind of hard to believe that 2025 is almost gone. Just a reminder, you can book a consultation with me. I'm doing 10% off of consultations just until the 26th. This will be with the code Holiday 25, and I'm also doing a webinar on the astrology of 2026. This will be on December 20th at 11 a.m. Eastern. It is recorded if you're not available or it's not your time zone where you're available, and it's typically a few hours, but there's an introduction, and I do a sign by sign guide as well. So I appreciate you all. I hope you all had, especially for those in the United States, I hope you had a great holiday week or whatever, and I will see you all next week. Take care. Bye-bye.